Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. It is the return of the Maize and Blue Breakdown. Clayton Safety here with Anthony Broome. He's on his second week on the job, doing a great job so far. Obviously, everybody's seen the content he's bombarded the site with. He was on our roundtable last week with myself and Chris Ballas, breaking down Michigan-Nebraska, previewing that game. Then he was on his post-game podcast that we're starting here, live show, instant reaction. So check that out if you didn't see it, and then check it out after the Northwestern game in about a week and a half, because he'll be back on there with some live stuff. So he's bringing a ton to the Wolverine.com. Anthony joins us from Maize and Brew if you didn't listen to either of his things. But Anthony, welcome to the Maize and Blue Breakdown. And by the way, we did get the blessing from Austin Fox that if we wanted to keep naming it this, and we could change it later. We're still up, we're debating that, but we did get the blessing, so we're all good there. But Anthony, welcome to the show.
Well, if there are royalties to pay for that name, that's coming out of your pocket, not mine. That's a you and Austin.
That's fair. That's fair.
No, I'm glad to be here. Thank you again for the kind words and the support and the help that you and the team at the Wolverine have given me so far. I kind of feel like I'm drinking from the fire hose right now. It's not often let's just say it wasn't in the cards to switch jobs in the middle of football season. So there's been a lot that's been thrown at me so far, but it's, I'm part of a very hardworking crew, a welcoming crew, a patient crew. That's the biggest key in all of this, is the patience. But yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Post-game show last week I thought went pretty well, given that it was at 12:30 in the morning after an emotional night game, but everyone was charged up. It's easy to do when they win. So it's easy to hop on there, to find the energy to connect and to interact with people. So I'm really looking forward to, hopefully, first off, no more night games. That would be nice. But I'm really looking forward to the post-game engagement that we start to get out of those types of things. So thank you, Clayton. It's an honor to be here. I'm so happy to be here, and let's keep working and get after it.
Yeah, well, we're happy to have you. You've been a great fit so far, as everybody's expressed, including a lot of the readers on the message board. Some will never like you, Anthony. You just got to come to grips with that, and you already know that from being around the block. So let's talk about, and by the way, speaking of that, the night game thing, I was out in Nebraska with Chris Ballas and I'm still trying to catch up on some of that sleep. This bye week came at the perfect time, not only for us, especially with you joining as well. Probably, nice to get a little bit of, time to just kind of gather yourself as well. Yeah. But it also came at a great time, I think, for this team. So what we're going to do today is talk about each position group real quick and give some quick thoughts. I did a midseason report card on every position group, offense, defense, and then, one for the special teams. Anthony, you gave takeaways in a column as well on each position group. So it's kind of that midseason, 6 games in, perfect time to go through that and assess what we've seen so far and kind of project maybe what we're going to see going forward from this Michigan team at each spot. Then we will check in on the Big Ten. We'll take a look at what was a crazy weekend last weekend, look at and reassess who we think is going to win the Big Ten, each division. We'll take a look at the college football top 10. We're going to pick some college football games as well, and we will talk about Michigan basketball landing Jet Howard, 4-star shooting guard, wing, also the son, of course, of head coach Juwan Howard. So we're going to get to all of that, but let's just start with some general thoughts on this Michigan football team coming off of a thrilling win at Nebraska. And we both said it last week when we were on with Chris Ballas that they need to get out of this game with a win no matter what. And I said, the best wins are by 1 point or more when you're going into a hostile environment and you're playing a pretty decent team. This is a team that probably without that Illinois loss was going to compete potentially for the Big Ten West. I think that's Iowa's, and we'll get to that. But, this is a pretty decent Nebraska team. It's the best offense Michigan has faced all year, the best quarterback they'd faced all year. All that stacked against you. And I'll tell you, that environment was unbelievable. You had to come out with a win. That's exactly what Michigan did, and I think there's some things to build on there. That third quarter was pretty concerning, but they were able to get the job done. Your general thoughts about Michigan coming into this bye week, coming off of 2 tough road wins.
Yeah, first and foremost, I think, and this is no this is not me poo-pooing the win at Wisconsin by any means, but my understanding of that environment is that compared to what Camp Randall usually is, it was kind of a mausoleum, right? And what I've heard from players, from people who were there, was that Nebraska was on fire Saturday night. There's one of the Michigan players said it was right up there with any environment they've been in, the whiteout environments, going to Ohio State, all those types of things. So it cannot be overstated enough how impressive a win that was for Michigan, not only because it was a tough environment, but because we've seen what they've done in those type of environments before. There's oftentimes been this kind of deer in the headlights look and this tightness, this tentativeness about what they did. And, they got out to a 13-0 halftime lead. It probably could have been more, but anytime you go into the locker room with a lead on the road, that's a big thing. And you knew coming out of that was that we knew Adrian Martinez was explosive. We know that Scott Frost in Nebraska like to do a lot of things to kind of, whether it be clapping to simulate the snap counts or just kind of these little annoyances here and there that throw the kitchen sink at teams, especially on the road. That's a lot to handle. And Nebraska came with everything they had. They were able to find some cracks in the Michigan defense and exploit that. But the thing of it is that to win in college football at this level, it's going to be super rare that your defense stays elite game in and game out, series to series. Like, you just need to get off the field in key moments. And Michigan certainly did that at the end of the game. But the biggest thing you need to be able to do is you just have to keep scoring. And Michigan was able to do that. They took every Nebraska punch that was thrown their way and threw one back, and it would ultimately, throw the knockout punch at the end of the game. But it's just, that was going to be one of those games that, coming off an emotional, blowout win at Wisconsin, bye week coming up, they know what's on the second half of the schedule. We know what's on the second half of the schedule. If they could have just gotten through that game unblemished and to this bye week where we are now, undefeated, everything else was gravy for them. And they were able to do that and then some. So hats off to Michigan for what was, like I said, a pretty impressive gut check victory for them.
Yeah, we're resting up a little bit this week, and so is the Michigan team. With, coming into the game, we knew that both of the guards hadn't, offensive guards hadn't, practiced all week. Zach Zinter looked like he was dealing with an ankle from what I could see, and then Trevor Keegan, a little bit of a shoulder injury, Jim Harbaugh said. They both were kind of in and out. Zach Zinter played in that first quarter after not starting the first series, and then just couldn't go. I think it was about 20 snaps for him. Keegan played a little bit more, but you saw 5 guys play the guard spots. They're banged up. Roman Wilson missed the game, didn't make the trip with what is thought to be a hand or wrist injury, potential return in a couple of weeks. So they needed this. And then it's perfect coming out of the bye. Northwestern, who is one of the worst teams in the FBS, in my opinion, they are on our list for games to pick this weekend. They have Rutgers. I'm excited to talk about that game as well at the end. Tune-up type of game. Then you go in and you throw everything you have at Michigan State on the day before Halloween in East Lansing, and then you go from there. And we all know how tough November is going to be, but I think it's a perfect time for Michigan to have this bye week. And Jim Harbaugh basically said as much. Usually when you're 6-0 and rolling, maybe you don't want to have a bye and stop any of that momentum, but it kind of felt like, I don't want to say they were limping coming into that Nebraska game because they were undefeated and they were still able to get the job done, but in a sense they were. So it sets up nicely. At the same time, they have no control over the schedule, so it's just basically a happenstance there. I'm sure a lot more from that Nebraska game and the rest of the first half of the season will come up here as we break down each position group. But let's start on offense with the most important position on the field, the most talked about position on the field, quarterback. Cade McNamara has been extremely efficient. He's done everything this Michigan offense has asked him to do. He only has the one interception, which came against Nebraska, which was a bad one. I still want to know if that was, maybe a miscommunication or what happened there. He's only taken 1 sack also last week. Then you have J.J. McCarthy, who we saw starting that second half against Wisconsin. They're putting him in now in meaningful snaps, getting him some time, using him more as a runner in some read option stuff, but we all know he has the ability to throw the ball as well. But, there's kind of this little debate. It's not quite to the point where, there's some people saying that JJ should start, and that's always going to happen. But Michigan's in a pretty good spot here, I think, where Cade McNamara has been so solid through the first half of the season, and you have a bright future at the position in J.J. McCarthy. where you feel pretty good about that room right now. And also have to remind people as well that Cade Mcnamara has started 7 games at Michigan. It's not like he's some third-year starter that, has just kind of showed his ceiling already. He's improving too. And he's done a really good job, I think, managing this team, managing this offense. I gave them a B when, grading this position group. Do you think that's fair? And I guess what's your overall assessment?
That feels about right. It's the grade on the quarterbacks comes with the asterisk of really for the first half of, the first 3 games of this season when they're in non-conference play, they weren't really being asked to do a whole lot. So it's hard to grade them based on that. But I think what we've seen, and by the time you guys hear this or see the video, hear the podcast, whatever form you consume it in, I will have a column up on the Wolverine about the quarterback situation. And so I won't divulge. I want you to go read that. So go check that out first. But basically the long or the short of it is exactly what you just said. I think that this is kind of I hesitate to say best case scenario for Michigan. I think the best case is that whoever you're starting at quarterback looks like Joe Burrow or Zach Wilson, you know what I mean? The star that that's eluded them over the last 7 years. But I think in this current setup, Michigan should feel great about what they have there right now. I think this quarterback room they have, at least from a starter and backup perspective, is probably the healthiest they've had with the highest floor. I think that's the thing that Cade Mcnamara has really done a nice job with, is establishing a floor for quarterback play. Like, we know at its most basic, when you boil down Cade Mcnamara to the most basic takeaway of what he is as a football player, he is poised. He feels out the pass rush extremely well. Accuracy, not really where you'd like it. I think he's around 60% right now. Really would probably like to have that in the 65, 70%, given that this is an offense with a lot of higher percentage throws. But he leads drives that end in points. And Michigan found itself in a game last week, like I said before, where you had to keep scoring points. And Cade Mcnamara was able to do that for them. Now, the elephant in the room with all of this is obviously having a former 5-star guy in JJ McCarthy, who we talked to him this week during bye-week media availability. That guy is the total package. If you didn't believe it by seeing the glimpses we have of him in games or watching his high school film, go look back at some of the stuff he had to say this week. He's charismatic. He's a good leader. He's enthusiastic. That guy, he's going to be too good to keep off the field at some point. And he already is. What we've seen in the last 2 weeks, I mean, McCarthy got some garbage time reps early on in non-conference play, but he took the first snap of the second half at Wisconsin, and he took the 6th snap of the game at Nebraska last week. And, hasn't really thrown the ball yet when he's coming in those type of moments. But the fact that you can have your cake, like Michigan, this coaching staff, Jim Harbaugh has to win. Like, lest we forget in this start that they've had, the man had his pay slashed in half. There's a lot of pressure on that coaching staff to get it figured out. And the idea that, and the easiest way to do that, it helps with recruiting, it helps with everything, is to win football games. And the idea, or the fact that you've been able to both win games and now you're kind of peeling back, you've gotten good quarterback play out of Cade Mcnamara. I think he's maybe 29th out of 300 quarterbacks on Pro Football Focus, whatever it is. But he might, don't quote me on that. My numbers are all mixed up today. But point being, he's been pretty solid. And the fact that he hasn't lost you games yet and has helped you win games while you can still kind of peel back what JJ McCarthy and his role can be on this team, I think that's really just a best case scenario for Michigan in this current setup.
Yeah, and I'll say on his, I've been impressed with his accuracy, especially on the deep ball. And I think that some of these receivers have to come down with a few more balls. I think it was 80, according to Sports Info Solutions, 84 of his 101 catchable passes have been caught. I was eyeballing a few, of the other teams around the country in terms of what their percentage is there. That's, I think, a little below average, based on kind of eyeballing some of them. They didn't have a total rankings on that, but, being able to see all the numbers. I don't think he's getting great separation from the receivers. We'll talk about them as well. I guess we can just go into them because we're talking about the pass game already.
I want to correct something really quick because someone will do it either here or on the boards or wherever.
Go ahead.
Pro Football Focus has Cade Mcnamara ranked as the 79th quarterback out of 221.
Okay.
What I had that confused with was he is 28th in the country in QBR on ESPN. So wanted to make sure that was clear before someone corrected me and wrote a letter to the editor to have me removed from the site. So
Right. No, that's important. And I think the 28th in QBR, I mean, has showed just how efficient not only he's been, but just the Michigan offense has been. And the fact that leaning on a run game, and we'll talk about the running backs, certainly helps as well. The fact that they're in second and third down and manageable and all of that. They're playing just really solid football right now, team football, and I think that's helped every single position group. But let's talk about the receivers. I graded them as a C. After Ronnie Bell went down, I think that was just such a big hit to this team. He was kind of that one dynamic guy. You've seen guys step up at times, and Cornelius Johnson, Roman Wilson had the breakout game, 6 catches for 71 yards. I think 3 or 4 of those were first downs, on third down. You've seen bits and pieces, and Dalen Baldwin's, I think, done a pretty good job, though a lot of his yards are on 2 plays in garbage time from J.J. McCarthy, not discounting that, but just the fact that, those are, when they came in the game. Not a ton of separation, as I kind of mentioned. Cade McNamara, I think, has done a pretty good job there, but he's not getting guys that are totally wide open in man coverage, or, and a lot of that can also be attributed to, potentially the route trees and things like that. But I don't know. I think this is a pretty okay receiver room right now without Ronnie Bell, with the potential to get better as the season goes on. Mikey Sainer still has been pretty quiet, other than that big catch, and that was a hell of a catch he had against Nebraska. But I think he's been a little more quiet in the slot than you'd like to see. And then AJ Henning as well. People are clamoring for him, but when he gets in, is he really getting open? Is he really a great tactician when it comes to being a route runner? I haven't seen that yet either. I think he's dynamic when he gets the ball in his hands, and that's why we've seen him take over the punt return role and take over the guy, basically the guy that's going to take those end arounds. But I don't know. Right now, I'm a little bit mellow on this receiver room until they kind of prove a little bit more. And I think the challenges are going to get tougher as the season goes on. When you play Penn State, who has one of the best pass defenses in the country, when you play some of these tougher teams, a Michigan State as well, who has a couple of good corners. So I think it's going to be something to watch, and there's still kind of a question mark for me.
Yeah, I think it's a big question mark right now. And I think it was a question for Michigan even before Ronnie Bell was injured, because they took a transfer in Dalen Baldwin during the summer. What
would they have done numbers wise if they didn't get him? I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, what I see right now is a lot of guys who are still learning and developing and trying to figure things out. Like, this isn't an Alabama situation where what was it last year? Jalen Waddle goes down and you still have Devonta Smith and all of these other guys on the offense. Like, it's not like that. I think Cornelius Johnson he's been fine. He's been okay. I think the advanced analytics would probably bear that out. But other than that, I think everyone's been a little bit inconsistent with drops and definitely separation too. I think that, if there are any concerns about Michigan's offense in the second half of the year is, people are always going to look at Josh Gaddis's play calling, and there's been some curious things that have happened at times there. But, a group that he has a big hand in is developing these wide receivers too. And make no mistake about it, they have been thrown into the fire big time. Like, they were going to lean on Ronnie Bell this year. And, pro scouts were looking at Ronnie Bell closely. And even in just the limited action we saw him against Western Michigan, that looked like a guy that was going to be Michigan's unquestioned number one. Now he's got a torn ACL. We'll see what happens with him in the future. But, it seems like they're slowly starting to come around. I'd love to see more out of AJ Henning, but what people forget about him is that in high school, it was kind of like, he was just an offensive weapon. He wasn't a guy that was a route runner, or, he's faster than everyone, and he's a track star. So he ran around everyone.
He played a lot of running back. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. He played a lot of running back in high school. So that's a guy where, even when we talk about his development, like, Michigan couldn't even necessarily, and trust isn't the word, but he wasn't ready to return punts for them when Ronnie Bell went down. We saw Caden Cole start for a few weeks. So at some point, the light's that's got to come on for a guy like that. And again, he's still a sophomore, so he's learning, and I get it. It takes time, especially when you come into a college campus that raw. But A lot of these guys, like Roman Wilson, it was great to see him break out a few weeks ago. It is just Michigan's luck that he has the game of his career. It looks like he might be a guy that's coming on, that he goes down with an injury. So these guys have had a rough go of it this year. Who would have thought that Dalen Baldwin, guy who coming into camp maybe could have been Michigan's fourth or fifth wide receiver, that's someone that it looks like they might kind of start to lean on here, along with Cornelius Johnson. So a lot of work still to do there. I do think at some point in the season, Harbaugh talked about this week with true freshman Andrel Anthony, someone who makes a lot of big plays in practice, someone who has a good rapport with JJ McCarthy. He's been a part of those late night workouts or when they come back from games. I think at some point he's going to factor in this year, but right now I won't call it incomplete. There's plenty of snaps to grade off of, but Michigan needs more out of those guys.
I agree. Michigan's getting all they've wanted, all they could ask for, and more out of the running backs. Man, this has been an impressive group. I mean, we knew Hassan Haskins kind of had taken over that role last season. And based on what we've heard, it's not why Zach Charbonnet transferred. He wanted to be closer to home and all that. But it was clear that Hassan Haskins was kind of the number one coming out of last season. And, that wasn't going to change unless another guy really took a huge step forward, surpassed him, or Hassan Haskins just didn't get any better. He got better. He is, he's been incredible. The hurdle he had against Nebraska, but, just the fact that he fights for those extra yards. And when he was spotted short on that third down, I love how Jim Harbaugh put it, where basically maybe the refs couldn't even believe, the extra effort and the push that he had because they marked him about 3 yards short.
I don't think the refs were in disbelief.
I know.
I think they need their eyes checked.
Yeah. I thought that was a funny way to put it, though. And then Blake Coram, who in those first few games, he hasn't started a game this year. But in those first few games, he started to look like, okay, this is, potentially a J.K. Dobbins type, and I think that he has that ceiling. But, he's come down a little bit the last couple of weeks, but he's still a dynamic playmaker there. You saw him score that touchdown around the edge. I think he's great on the edges. Get him out there more a little bit. But this, the fact that, let me pull up the numbers real quick. When you look at Blake Coram with 610 rushing yards, Hassan Haskins with 492, Blake's averaging 6.3 yards a carry, 4.9 for Hassan Haskins, who does a little bit more in short yardage, which you got to mention there. Both have 8 rushing touchdowns. Credit the offensive line for a lot of it. We'll talk about them as well. But, man, this is an A group right now. And Michigan has a guy that the future is also bright with in Donovan Edwards as well. So this room couldn't look any better. You have to mention as well Mike Hart and the job he's done with these guys. Blake Coram looks like a different runner. We knew he had that speed, but did he have that patience and the vision to find the holes and hit the hole when it's there? It's there right now for him. The light turned on, I think, in that aspect of things, and damn does he work hard. So, it was just a matter of time until it clicked for him, and he's only going to get better as well. But you can't say enough good things about this group.
No, a Mike Hart home run hire, and we talk about backs that look elite. The grades would bear that out too. I mean, Blake Coram is currently the top ranked running back in college football on Pro Football Focus. Hassan Haskins comes in at 14th, and both of those guys are in that Blake Coram's 90.9 and Haskins is 86.2. So that's you're talking big time stuff there. And the thing about Coram, and this is where I'd like to, more of what I'd like to see out of him in the second half, getting him more involved in the pass game. He has the highest receiving grade on the team right now. We talk about speed and space all the time. That's a guy I'd like to see Michigan attack the edges a little bit more with. You'd love to. They don't really have much of a screen game right now, but it feels like he's tailor made for that. I can't say enough about how well those guys have done this year. And Donovan Edwards is someone who I think you're going to see his role start to develop here in the second half. He's the best pass blocking, at least grade wise, back by a wide margin right now over those other two guys. And I think that's maybe what's impressed me most about him is that when he comes in, he looks the part. It's still coming along in those other games. He's way behind in the snap count compared to those other two guys. But Michigan has potentially, we know they have a nationally elite two-headed monster here. they might be able to peel back a third if someone is, banged up, or someone needs to be spelled for a bit, or Michigan just needs a change of pace. Donovan Edwards too. We've seen him get open down the field in the passing game too. There was the wheel route against, I believe it was Wisconsin, where he dropped it, would have been a touchdown. Like, you got to make that play, but it's a true freshman too. I get it. I think he maybe makes that play in the second half of the year. So it's hard not to be excited what they have here.
No doubt. And how many pass blocking snaps does he have? Because I think that might factor in too, to him being the highest graded. Because I love what Blake Coram does in that. Okay.
It's 3. Don't.
So sample size there, but yeah, no doubt. He does look the part, and he has that feel to him when he gets the ball. And, I watched him a lot in high school. I think I went to 4 or 5 games last year. And he's right. He said it on Tuesday night when we got to talk to him. He tried to use his speed for just about everything last season, and rightfully so, because he was the best athlete, the best player on the field in literally every game. Now he's getting north and south. You see a little more patience with him. You see him lowering that shoulder when it's clear he can't get outside, and it's just, all right, let's pick up another couple of yards. That's the Mike Hart in him, and he said that, getting vertical. Let's move on to the tight ends before we get to the offensive line and then shift over to the defense. I have him at a C+. It's not necessarily because of the guys in that room. I don't even blame Jay Harbaugh. And C+ isn't that bad. The way I graded it basically was A, if you're, kind of near the top of the Big Ten there, and, B, if you're kind of in that first handful, C-ish if you're kind of middle of the pack. And I think that's where this tight end group is right now, nationally or in the Big Ten. Haven't made a ton of explosive plays. We've seen them over the last couple of weeks, though, be able to be a little bit more involved in the vertical passing game. Michigan's using a lot of tight ends in the run game with a lot of 12 personnel, which is, 1 running back, 2 tight ends. It's their most common position grouping right now, or personnel grouping at the current moment. So they're relying on these guys. Jim Harbaugh's going back to his roots a little bit, playing some more tight ends, I think, this season than we've seen in the past. And it's working in the run game. But I'd just like to see a little bit more out of them. I'd like to see them get a few more targets in the pass game. But at the same time, I think Eric All, has been a tad of a disappointment when it comes to route running. But Luke Schoonmaker is a guy I'd like to see get the ball a little bit more. And shout out to Joel Hornigford for getting the first reception of his career, a big one, a 3rd down pickup, 10-yard gain last week against Nebraska. So kind of would like to see more out of this group. They've been okay. They haven't been bad by any stretch, but it's kind of like the receivers where I'd like to see a little bit more, but at the same time, they're being asked to do quite a bit in the run game, and they've delivered more times than not.
Yeah, I think when I did my mid-season takeaways from each group, I think I more or less just kind of said, yeah, they've been fine. Nothing spectacular there. I think Eric All, I've said a couple critical receptions that I think maybe last year may have been drops, or, and that's, I don't know if that was a focus thing or a confidence thing, but the one thing I can say about him is that he does seem more, I guess confident would be the way I would put it. It seems like he's Definitely. A little more poised out there. Again, he's good for maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 catches a game. The other guys have had moments as well, Schoonmaker, and like you said, it was cool to see Honigford. What a cool story that he has so far. But yeah, they're being asked to do a lot. They're not necessarily doing it great, and they're not doing poorly. They're just kind of there right now. They have their role. It works within the confines of what Michigan does offensively. This isn't the early era Jim Harbaugh teams where you're feeding the ball to Jake Butt and Zach Gentry and Sean McEwen and some of those guys, but they're there. they're fine. I don't notice that. I think the highest compliment, and maybe something that is a little bit of a criticism, is that I don't really notice them a ton out there. So they're just kind of there when they are, and they've been reliable when they've been called upon, but I think there's more that they can do for sure.
Yeah, I think a big part of that is the way they're being used. But last 2 weeks, 10 of the team's 40 receptions and 105 of the squad's 508 receiving yards with 5 key first downs have been from the tight end. So we're starting to see it a little bit more with their involvement in the passing game, and I think we will see that going forward. as Michigan kind of opens up this offense, it's been kind of nice for Josh Gaddis because they were running the ball so well early on in the season, and they continue to, not at the same level, but where there's so many things in that playbook they haven't shown yet. You know how you run a play and then there's something off of it that you can run a week later or a series later. They haven't got to that point where they've had to turn more than 1 or 2 pages in that playbook yet. So it's been a big added bonus, especially with some big games coming up. And I think the tight ends are going to be part of those wrinkles a little bit that we're going to see in the second half of the season. Finishing up with the offense, the offensive line, an A- for me. I was between B+ and A- because, I don't think this is like some outstanding, unbelievable offensive line with pros all over the field. I think Andrew Stuber is going to be a really good pro, and I think Zach Zinter down the line will be a good pro, and we'll see on guys like Trevor Keegan, potentially Ryan Hayes, but he's been kind of what he's been over the last couple of years. But shout out to Sharon Moore for what he's done with this group because they're one unit playing together. They don't have perennial pros all over all over that line, but they're playing unified, which has been the number one thing these guys have said Sharon Moore has come in and done. They're not allowing sacks. They've only allowed 11 hits on the quarterback, 2 sacks on the season, one of them from the starting offensive line on Cade McNamara, which came 6 games into the season. 21 quarterback hurries. That's on 147 pass blocking snaps. And then we talked about it with the running backs, how Michigan's, the 8th ranked rushing offense in the country. A lot of the credit there goes to the offensive line, though there has been quite a bit of yards after contact. I don't have the exact number, but it's one of the higher amounts. I think it's top 15 in the country there. So you got to give the credit to the running backs on that. But this offensive line has just been ahead of schedule, which I think is the best thing you could say about them. We thought they'd be okay. We thought they'd be pretty good. But the fact that they were this good this early in the season, I thought this would be the time where they're clicking now. They were clicking starting game 1, and now they're just building off of that. And this bye week's huge for getting a couple of those guys healthy, as we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I mean, it's not Runyon, Bredesen, Ruiz, Onwenu, Mayfield in terms of pro talent up front, right? But I think what has impressed me the most about them is that new position coach, COVID year was bad. That set a pretty low bar for what the start of the season could be in terms of what improvement looked like. Might have been the fastest offensive line start we've seen from a Michigan team, regardless of the names or their pro prospects. I think that Andrew Vastardis is playing, as a former walk-on, playing arguably the best football of anyone on the offensive line right now. I think that, again, Andrew Stuber has been outstanding too. We talked about earlier, they had to play 5 guards against Nebraska. All of those guys came in and held their own. I don't think anyone really, to me, stood out as not being ready or not being worthy of being thrown out there. So.
Carson Barnhart, Reese Atterbury, they fared well. They were guys, you mentioned it with the tight ends, where sometimes it's good to not be noticed. They weren't noticed as much when they were in, and I think that's a huge plus. We keep hearing about the depth. We finally were able to see that in effect on Saturday night.
Yeah, I think the guy who can play a lot better, or who needs to play a lot better, is Ryan Hayes. I think what we've seen a lot is him getting beat across his face, and Michigan's going to need him to shore up a little bit there on the edge. But other than that, like I said, the combinations that they've thrown out there have worked. And there was hype coming into the season that Zach Zinter might be their best, quote unquote, all around offensive player. I don't know if I've seen that, but I do think that a couple years down the road, like we're going to be talking about this guy as in the same breath that we're talking about a Vastardis or a I wanted to say Mayfield, Stuber at right tackle. I still have right tackle Jalen Mayfield in my brain. Stuber out there. So those guys, again, talked about how much of a home run that Mike Hart has been for the running backs. That pairing of Mike Hart and Sharon Moore has been chef kiss so far. Really good job by those guys.
No doubt. And giving Sharon Moore more input, no pun intended, I guess there, but more is more, when it comes to his input in the offense, being elevated to co-offensive coordinator, getting some more hands-on stuff from him. Mike Hart's been involved, Matt Weiss as well, kind of collaborating a little bit more on this offense and creating the identity that it has at this point through the season. We talked so much before the year about what the identity of this team's going to be, or offense, and they kind of said we're going to be a team that leans on the offensive line, that's physical up front, that's going to run the football, and they've done all those things really well so far this season. Let's flip over to the defense. Now, it's kind of confusing with how multiple this defense is under Mike Mcdonald, who's doing a phenomenal job for the most part to start off his tenure with, who's at what position. Aiden Hutchinson, Taylor Upshaw, Mike Morris, those guys are all listed as defensive ends. David Ojabo and Jalen Harrell listed as linebackers. So you can kind of combine the two when it comes. Let's just talk about the the outside linebackers and the interior defensive line as one unit, guys that are lining up on the line of scrimmage, because I think it's so fascinating to see just how much better they've gotten, not only on the edge, but on the interior. When you look at what they've been able to do with protecting the back end, which was so suspect last season and downright bad at times, I think a lot of that had to do with the scheme. But you're seeing Aiden Hutchinson, who's a midseason All-American on ESPN.com, leads the Big Ten with 5.5 sacks, ninth in the country. He is dominant. And right now, you need to put two guys on him. You need to chip him with a tight end, and even that doesn't work at times. And even the double teams don't work at times to even contain him right now. And then when you do that, you're freeing up opportunities for other guys. So the stat that stood out to me the most when I was kind of digging in on these guys this week was 37.3% of pass rushing snaps. Michigan's getting pressure with 4 guys. That's without bringing 5 guys. And that is, that ranks top 10 in the country.
Dang.
They're blitzing, less or more than 10% less than they did a year ago because they can get home with 4. And when they do come, by the way, they're disguising these blitzes really well. They're moving Aiden Hutchinson around where these defenses, he's in the back of their head where he's going to be. David Ojabo with 4.5 sacks. He's getting better by the week. This guy is not a guy who's played a ton of football in his career. So every single rep he gets in a game is just like times 2 for another guy because he just hasn't had that in the past, especially with not playing much his first 2 seasons at Michigan in game action. And then the interior has been much improved as well. I think the B plus grade I gave this group as a defensive line has a lot to do with the edge guys. I think the interior is more of a B minus type, but they've been way better than we've seen. Mazi Smith stepping into that nose tackle role, he's perfect for it. And then Chris Hinton continuing to play some pretty good football there in kind of the 3 tech type spot. Mostly 2 down linemen with the 2 edge guys, and you're seeing 3 safeties in there with Dax Hill at the nickel. But, against Wisconsin and in some goal line situations, you've seen some 3 defensive tackles. That's kind of the one thing I've loved the most about this Mike Mcdonald defense is he's willing to adapt to what the offense is doing. And defense is inherently reactionary to an extent. You want to set the tone, you want to dictate the game, but at the same time, you're defending. You're trying to keep somebody out of an end zone. You're trying to keep them from getting first downs. So you have to adapt a little bit. And Mike Mcdonald has been, just fantastic at that so far. And that has a lot to do with the defensive line. It's helped them. And this defensive line is, I think, top ranked on PFF. The front 7 overall is top ranked on PFF if you go by those metrics. So there's a lot of good things you could say about this D line. And, when you look at the numbers and when you just watch them play, all that into account, it's just such an improved group.
Yeah, how a lot of this, not to brag too much on what came before this year, but how a lot of their issues may have been compounded by the schematics and the play caller that was here before. Sean Nua took a lot of that heat too, because the defensive line the last couple of years, it just didn't seem like they were coming along the way they needed to. And when he was retained, I know a lot of people were kind of caught off guard by that, but I remember hearing that Harbaugh and Michigan and the staff was confident that he was going to fit in just fine with what they wanted to do here. And he's, again, we talk about assistants who've been earning their paycheck this year, Mike Hart, Sharon Moore. Sean Nua has led what it's probably the most improved group on this entire roster right now. Like I said, Mazi Smith, big, violent, check, works for me. That's a good nose tackle. Him and Chris Hinton, we've been waiting for them to come on for a while, and they're playing extremely well. And I think the foundation for all of this was set when Mike Mcdonald was hired, and that it's not, he said it from day one. He said, it's not that complicated what we want to do. Our pass rushers are pass rushers. Want them to get to the quarterback. And I think that what he's done is say, hey, this is what you're good at. This is what we're going to get out of you. This is how we're going to set you up to succeed. You're seeing a lot less of the square peg, round hole type of things. Like, these guys don't have to fit into a scheme. The scheme is being fit to them. And so you can't say enough about it. All starts up front with Mozzie Smith, Chris Hinton. I've gotten some good rotational snaps from other guys there, but Aiden Hutchinson had a long chat with Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl, another article that's up on the site when you hear this, about what he brings. He doesn't see all that different of a player. He's just finishing plays now. Has always had talent. Has always been violent. I know that for him, playing a little bit lighter and being able to be a little more versatile in Mcdonald's scheme, rushing from that linebacker position has done a huge service to his draft stock moving forward. You're seeing people say, and again, these mocks, these boards right now don't mean much of anything, but there are people that think he might be able to push a Kayvon Thibodeau for that first pass rusher off the board. David Ojabo, that's the guy I feel like for at least 2 years I've been waiting for him to come on. He's getting better every week. Mike Morris and Taylor Upshaw are giving them good snaps. We've seen them work in Jalen Harrell and Braden McGregor in some of those spots as the guys who might be the next in line. So right now, I know I can't say we knew that they had talent at these positions coming into the year, but I think maybe the biggest thing for me is the depth. Things don't look as bleak's not the right word, but they're a little more proven there than I thought they would be at this point in the year. And that's really, really good to see, because they're going to need all of those guys in the rotation down the stretch here.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too. A lot of those names that you just mentioned there with some of the guys that are rotating in are guys we didn't talk about last season or even really in the spring. We had started hearing that Mike Morris was having a good spring, and then Chris Jenkins just had an unbelievable fall camp to get himself in the rotation as well. So credit Sean Nua for developing those guys. Also credit those guys for taking last season and using it as kind of just, all right, let's get a little experience. Some of those first year, second year guys, and then making that jump the next season. You're seeing it at not only defensive line, but some other positions, which leads us to the linebackers. Nikhai Hill-Green is the guy I'm talking about there, but we have to start with Josh Ross, who is the heart and soul of this defense. That's how he's been described at times. He's been described as, so many different things. Just the number one leader possibly on this team, even though they've got quite a few good ones, which bodes well for the entire team. But when he went out in that second half against Rutgers, it was almost more of a, as much of a testament, I guess I'll say, to just how valuable he is as it is when he's in the game. But he's damn good when he's in the game as well. Jim Harbaugh said that he's playing as well as any linebacker or inside linebacker he's had at Michigan. I don't know that that's true, and we texted about this. Yeah, go ahead.
Coach Devin Bush, let's get a little easy. No disrespect to Josh Ross, but
right. And I don't think Devin Bush is going to be taking any offense to that anytime soon, because he knows exactly what Jim Harbaugh is doing there, and he has so much trust in Josh Ross. If you're Mike Mcdonald, and he got in, took this job in January, showed up to Ann Arbor, met with some of the guys, I'm sure he was, had a huge smile on his face when he learned that he had a guy like Josh Ross and how intelligent, how smart, how good he is, especially playing more healthy this season. So I gave them a B because I think he's been incredible in the inside. He's still not a Devin Bush. He's still not like a top 10 pick type guy, but he's doing everything that they're asking him to do. And then Nikhai Hill-Green, Junior Colson, a true freshman, rotating in there. They've been good. They've had moments where they've, made some big plays. Nikhai Hill-Green made some huge plays down the stretch there against Rutgers. 2 tackles for loss on that second to last series, on third and fourth down. Junior Colson has come in, done very, very well. He shows that he might be a future All-American, but they're still young. They're still learning, pumping the brakes there. But the fact that they have improved defensive line play to play behind, I think has been big for this, group as well, where now they're able to just play downhill. If they're in the right position, they're more than likely going to make a play. And Josh Ross is damn near always in position. Nikhai Hill-Green's getting there. Junior Colson's learning, and he's a hell of an athlete too. So, pretty impressed, pretty pleased with this group. George Hilo, I think, has done a good job, and it helps that Mike Mcdonald, being your defensive coordinator, has such a strong background with linebackers.
Yeah, Ross is the heartbeat right now. And while we can separate what his NFL prospects might be, I don't know. I think he might be kind of a fringe guy at the moment, but you saw his value has never been more apparent than the second half of that Rutgers game, or the Rutgers game where he wasn't on the field. When you were the guy in the middle of that defense that wears the headset, communication is paramount there, and I think he's done a great job.
He doesn't actually wear the headset, but
well, you know what I
yeah, okay. I was just making sure there's no violation going on. We can confirm he's not wearing a headset like they do in the NFL. Yeah, I know.
Figuratively speaking, what your middle linebacker is. That's the guy who gets guys lined up. He's pointing stuff out. He's played really well there, and I think that probably the biggest thing that we've seen from him this year, and this is credit to Mike Mcdonald. Mcdonald's been using him more as a pass rusher. I think that Josh Ross is a heat-seeking missile. That works for me. Now, is he a guy who's going to go out and light it up in coverage and do a ton of good things there? I don't know if he's that guy right now. Michigan doesn't have that guy on the roster right now, but coming into the season, we kind of were like, okay, well, Josh Ross is one of these starting backers because he has to be. He's been here. Michael Barrett, I guess maybe is the other one, switching over from Viper, but we haven't even really seen a ton of Mike Barrett. He's only played 24 snaps. Nikhai Hill-Green had a great offseason, earned that spot next to Ross, and Junior Colson is, I think, kind of somewhat as expected. We thought coming in as a freshman, he was going to have a chance to get on the field early, and he has. And you can tell he's still a puppy when you see him on the field and you listen to him talk. Like there's that, you talk about steel in your spine and building a callus and all these Harbaugh-isms. There's a lot of that still needs to happen with him. But, when you look at how he grades compared to Josh Ross, he's kind of right up there, and even better in a few categories. So, like I said, all of a sudden it goes from being, I have no idea who's going to be a guy here. It's probably Ross. It's probably Barrett too. Okay, Ross has been what he expected to be, but then you've got a guy who is young in Nikhai Hill-Green who's learning and seems like he's getting better every week. Junior Colson's going to be around here for a long time. It goes from being a position of, I can't call it a position of strength, but it goes to every snap that Hill-Green and Colson and Kalel Mullings has got in there as well. Every snap that those guys get is equity. It's equity in this year. It's equity into next year, given that those guys are going to be the ones that lead the way. So far, like I said, I think a lot of their success is due to what the guys, the level above them, have been able to do. But so far, it hasn't really been a big concern. So we'll see in the second half of the season.
An area that was a big concern coming into the season was, kind of like the linebackers, the corners. How were they going to fare after just kind of losing confidence, losing their mojo last season? Vince Gray didn't look like the same Vince Gray just in terms of body language as he did, the year prior. They've completely turned things around when it comes to that. Steve Klinkscale has done an outstanding job, even though he came in after spring ball when Mo Linguist left for the head coaching job at Buffalo. And I think it's been an upgrade in that department. I said it at the time. I said it before they hired him that I think if they got Steve Klinkscale, he'd be an upgrade. They get him. I said he'd be an upgrade. I think he's an upgrade. Not that we've seen what Mo Linguist would have done with this group, but his track record was more recruiting than on the field. But I digress on that. The corners. You have guys coming back that started every game last season in Jamon Green and Vince Gray, and they're playing some pretty solid football right now. They are, still, they don't have that high-end speed. I don't think they play the ball as well as I would like to see them play it, but at the same time, they're getting helped by this pass rush as well. When you look at, teams are having to get the ball out pretty quick with Aiden Hutchinson bearing down on them and some of these other guys, but they're doing what's asked. And by the way, we'll talk about the safeties in a second, but having a guy behind you in, post coverage and things like that, that helps a cornerback's confidence, not having to man up on every single play and play press coverage where if he gets by you, if he gets a step on you, you're toast. That's not the case anymore with this team. They're playing zone. I mentioned they're blitzing less because they don't have to. They're playing more zone, 10% more zone than they did a season ago, and playing more too high safety looks. So your thoughts on this group, kind of improved, still not an elite group. You don't have a Lavert Hill, you don't have a Jordan Lewis or even a Channing Stribling there, but you have some pretty good play.
Yeah, I think with these guys, namely Gray and Green, I think they've more or less kind of been what I expected they would be. And I've gotten some pushback on this. I said this on podcasts, at my previous stop, that the cornerbacks last year were really one of the only position groups on the team that I thought got better every game. And so far, I think that Gray and Green have, and the grades would bear this out too, have been slightly better than last year. I think that what has helped them a lot again is coming on the heels of what the front seven is doing. And when you don't have to hold as long in coverage, it helps. It certainly helps. So, like I said, I think for me, moving forward, outside of Gray, Green, and DJ Turner, who's gotten in there as well, if one of those guys goes down, I think depth becomes a huge concern here because I haven't really seen much of anyone else, right? So, like I said, I think the corners, similar to, I think we talked about the tight ends, and there was one other group in there, tight ends and wide receivers. I think they've just kind of they've been what they are. They've been okay so far. Now they're going to be tested big time. You've got explosive offenses coming up in obviously Michigan State, and we'll see what happens with Sean Clifford and Penn State, but they've got some NFL wideouts, and then obviously we always know what Ohio State's going to be, and Maryland will present some challenges on the back end as well. So those guys are going to be tested. I think they, playing the way they have now, will be fine if the pass rush continues to get there, but they have some big tests coming up. So I think the jury is still kind of out in that group.
No doubt. I have the safeties as an A-. They're helping the corners. As I mentioned, R.J. Moten took a huge step forward. I think that was big. Depth wasn't there last season. We had to see a decent amount of true freshman Mccarthy Page, who didn't do too well last season when he was called upon. But you have Dax Hill, who's basically a nickel corner right now, also blitzing. They're doing some different things, throwing some wrinkles in there. And then Brad Hawkins. Maybe it's recency bias with this A- grade I have for the safeties, but the plays he made, including the strip on Adrian Martinez, who was fighting for every inch there at the end of the game, continuing to churn his legs despite him saying he was just standing there, and got the ball stripped out. Then recovering the fumble, making a big play. Maybe it's recency bias, but I think this is one of the best position groups on the team. You have a guy who, Anthony, you did a roundup this week of NFL draft stuff. Dax Hill being projected as a first rounder by a couple different analysts. In Brad Hawkins, he's just been so solid throughout his career. He's playing, I think, his best ball, but he kind of is just a guy you can trust, and I think that's huge for that back line on a defense to be able to trust that guy back there. So pretty good performances by these guys so far.
Yeah, Hawkins has been, we talk about Hawkins has been really good. I think he grades out as the sixth best safety in the country right now in Pro Football Focus. Coverage wise, he's held up great. He's one of the best run defending safeties in college football. I mean, a lot has been made, and this is, again, no disrespect to this guy, but a lot has been made about what Josh Ross coming back has meant to the defense. I think Brad Hawkins has been a godsend for that back end because all of a sudden, technically speaking, I mean, Dax Hill is playing in the nickel and playing closer to the line of scrimmage. So really, if you didn't have Brad Hawkins back there deep, you're kind of, I don't want to say stuck with isn't the right word, but R.J. Moten and Mccarthy Page are younger guys, and those are the guys who kind of be that next in line there. So, yeah, I mean, what more can you say about? There's nothing more to say about Daxton Hill. I mean, he keeps getting better, which is incredibly impressive to me. Brad Hawkins, I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen him pop up on a lot of these early kind of draft prospect boards, but he's got a lot to gain here in the second half of the year in terms of being on display and what he's able to do. I mean, I think when people put on the tape of what he's been able to do so far, I think they're going to be pretty impressed with what they see. So Brad Hawkins, I mean, to me, and you can't take Aiden Hutchinson out of it, but if there's a non-Aiden Hutchinson defensive MVP so far, I kind of think Hawkins might be it.
Some high praise there. Yeah, and Dax Hill, his interception was unbelievable against Nebraska. Also had the pick against Wisconsin in the knockout blow on Graham Mertz against Wisconsin. So he's coming up with big plays in addition to being asked to do so much, in the nickel spot and, moving around to the different places he's been on the defense. Let's go rapid fire to finish up here just because we're running out of time. But I want to get your thoughts on Big Ten East champ, Big Ten West champ, Big Ten champ. I guess I can go first with I still have Ohio State winning the East. I picked Iowa to win the West coming into the year. I feel great about that. When you look at their schedule, here's their remaining games. They have Purdue at Wisconsin, at Northwestern, versus Minnesota, versus Illinois, and at Nebraska, which might be their toughest remaining game. That's basically a cakewalk now that they've beaten Penn State to the Big Ten championship game. Michigan is my toughest contender right now for Ohio State in the East. That could change after the Penn State-Michigan game, but that's where I kind of have things right now.
Yeah, I think Iowa's the lock. Like they're gonna win. They're gonna win the West and do it running away. I don't see anyone presenting much of a challenge for them unless they completely fall apart. I would still give the nod to Ohio State in the East. I know they fought through some stuff early on, but Oregon's no slouch. That's who they lost to. It seems like since they made their little defensive change, they've started to figure stuff out the last 3 weeks or so. So Ohio State would still be there. And this is not going to make me any friends here. And I realize that, but I have to say it because it's what I feel. I think if someone in the East right now is the biggest threat to Ohio State, and this goes back to what I said earlier about in college football, you need to keep scoring points and you have to be explosive. I really think what Michigan State's doing right now is incredibly impressive with Kenneth Walker and the wide receivers they have. I realize like October 30th cannot come quickly enough because that is the game to me that's going to really show who has a better shot of knocking off Ohio State, who presents more of a threat to them. Michigan State, I still have questions about them defensively, but at some point when you're ripping off a couple 50-yard plus touchdowns every week, I have to assume that's what you are. So in order to beat Ohio State, that's kind of that's the type of game you have to get in with them. And right now, I think they just might be a little bit more ready for that than Michigan is. So, but I'll take my lashings and move on from a take like that. It's fine.
Well, we'll see. It'll be decided on the field October 30th, as you mentioned, in East Lansing. Let's pick 6 games real quick. Michigan State, 4.5-point favorites at Indiana. I got Michigan State covering the 4.5 and winning this one kind of pretty handily here.
Yeah, I'm going to take Indiana only because I just feel like they're due for some chaos. There hasn't really been a lot of chaos in the chaos team this year. So I'm going to pick Indiana to cover. I still think Michigan State wins and escapes, similar to a game that Michigan just played at Nebraska.
Okay. And then Nebraska, 4.5-point favorites at Minnesota. Another tough one, but I feel like Nebraska feels like they're good. They're just not winning many games and will kind of still be up. They're not going to be too discouraged after the Michigan game and will win this one in cover, 4.5.
I'm with you there. I have Nebraska winning this game. I'm not a fan of what Minnesota brings to the table, despite them being a team I thought might win the West, but that was before Muhammad Ibrahim went down. So
one of the games I'm most excited, maybe not to watch, but just keep an eye on the score on, is Rutgers at Northwestern. Rutgers, 2.5-point favorites in a stadium that won't have many fans in it. Northwestern, it's usually opposing fans. Rutgers doesn't have any fans, so they won't be traveling. I got Rutgers winning this one by double digits. They're only 2.5-point favorites. Northwestern is one of the worst teams in the FBS, let alone the Power 5. So I think that they are just going to get crushed and will basically be destroyed mentally before they even enter the Big House next week.
Yeah, I don't know if Rutgers is good enough to really crush anyone, and I think that Northwestern is overdue coming off of a blowout loss to Nebraska. They're coming off of a bye week. I'm going to take Northwestern in this game.
Okay. That will be an interesting one that we'll talk about next week, depending on the result. I might not bring it up if Northwestern wins, but Purdue at Iowa, 11.5-point favorites. I don't know. Just seems like a lot of points. They're not an explosive team. They're a really good team. I just kind of feel like maybe a little bit of a letdown spot here. I'll take Purdue to cover 11.5.
Yeah, there's part of me that agrees with you, but I already put my pick down on the sheet, and I feel like Iowa's down game was last week, and they kind of were bailed out by the fact that Penn State lost its starting quarterback and put a traffic cone back there instead. I'm going to go Iowa covering the point spread this week.
Army at Wisconsin. Just give me a pick here for the sake of time. You have Army plus 14. I guess I just revealed your pick. I don't know. I'll take Wisconsin minus 14. And then the biggest one out of the Big Ten, Oklahoma State at Texas. Texas, 5-point favorites.
I'll go with Texas.
Okay. I'm so torn on that. Maybe I'll go with Texas too. Oklahoma State, okay, but maybe Texas, a little bit of a bounce back spot there for them. That is going to be our show, so we can keep it under an hour. We'll talk about Jet Howard on the next one as well. We've been talking about him a lot over the last couple of years, ever since Jawan took the job anyway. But Anthony, great performance on the first Maize and Blue Breakdown. We'll be back next week with that and more shows in between, and we'll see everybody then.